Tony, best drama series. Go.
No pressure. No pressure.
Best intro ever.
This category isn't difficult at all. I think Prevailing Wisdom has The Handmaid's Tale winning. I'm currently predicting The Handmaid's Tale, but I think this is an incredibly tight race. This is actually my favorite race, and unfortunately, on Emmy night, we're going to have to wait until the end of the evening to get to it. They're literally saving the best for last. Handmaid's Tale has just exploded in ways that I don't think any of us were prepared for. But it's not necessarily a safe bet to win. I mean, no streaming service has ever won drama series, and Hulu it's Hulu's first series nomination. And then you have a show like Stranger Things, which certainly has a passionate fan base, and under this kind of popular vote, all it takes is a small but passionate fan base. And then on the other hand, you have Westworld, which is the most nominated, scripted series of the year. So it depends on how much broad support that has. But I just feel like the acclaim for The Handmaid's Tale is too overwhelming to ignore. So that's where I am right now. Somebody talk me out of it.
I think, I had The Handmaid's Tale in there for a while, but I just switched to Stranger Things. This show did so well in its nomination, more than we were expecting it to do well, but I don't know if anybody had it, cracking 18 nominations, which is unbelievable for that show, or just unbelievable, period. It's gotten in everywhere. And what's also amazing about the show is that when did it premiere? It was like what right
around this time.
July.
Yeah, right around this time last year. It has all of the positivity that's been felt towards it is still there. It hasn't faded away, which usually you find that, as time passes on and people are able to reflect on things more, you'll have people that are like, oh, okay, yeah, it's good, but it wasn't as great as I remember it being, as I thought it was when I first saw it. This show has not lost any of that. And I really think that it has the more broad support, and I just think that it's going to seize on it.
I think legitimately 6 shows could win this, where I could see a path and a narrative to how they do it. I think the only show really out of it is House of Cards. But for Netflix, this is kind of a big moment for them, because they cannot lose this to Hulu and continue down their streaming service path. If they lose to AMC, par for the course, been there, done that. HBO, same thing. NBC gave HBO trouble when they were trying to win with the West Wing Sopranos battles. But if they lose to The Handmaid's Tale and Hulu on their first at-bat, it proves this whole dumping your show online, all 10 episodes, all 12 episodes, doesn't work. So for them, this is a very big kind of moment, because they have half the nominees. By Emmy standards, they have half the nominees, one less than half since they're 7. But I wouldn't count out anything. And I know we can all read the tea leaves as well as anyone else, read the tea leaves. But I think this might be one of those years where it doesn't matter. Like, usually you need a writing and directing nomination, but I still think This Is Us could do it if all those other shows kind of canceled each other out. So that's my thinking a little bit on that.
Wait, did you say the Better Call Saul can win?
I think it has a chance at winning. I think it shows up in enough categories where of the 2 returning shows, yeah, I think it's got a far better chance. It got a directing nomination it never was expecting. It's one of 3 shows that's in editing. So it's in a lot of those categories where you would need support. I would have preferred to get another acting nomination. But yeah, I could see how it could win. I'm not saying it's the most likely of them, but I could see the narrative and how it finally wins. It did have a good season, so.
I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is if this does become if this becomes a contest between Stranger Things and The Handmaid's Tale, which I think all of us agree that it's probably leaning towards one of those two, then it becomes a question of, okay, which one ticks off more boxes for Emmy voters? The one thing that The Handmaid's Tale has going for it is that there's a relevancy to it. There's a really like kind of earth-shattering reality to it that is incredibly relevant to the times that we're living in. Whereas Stranger Things, has more of a fantasy, period element to it. So it's going to be a question of which one resonates more with Emmy voters, or with enough Emmy voters for one of those to win.
I still would be. Go ahead.
Oh, the thing about that with The Handmaid's Tale is that that sort of mindset could also work in reverse.
Exactly.
Where we have it could seem so depressing, because that was the other thing with The Handmaid's Tale. Like, I couldn't get through more than like 2 or 3 episodes at a time, and I just had to be like, okay, I need something else right now. I want to watch South Park so I can watch fart jokes. But it may work against them in the same way.
I would not count out Westworld. I know we all kind of underestimated it, but I want to see head-to-head how it does in the categories where there's some overlap between it and Westworld, it and Stranger Things, and some of these others. How do they compete head-to-head at these tech categories? Does one trample the other? Do they kind of cancel each other out? Do we see some shows that aren't up for Best Drama Series win? That's when you could see something like The Crown or This Is Us kind of take this. When Northern Exposure, when Picket Fences won, it didn't have a writing or directing nomination for its first season. But the big show that year was Northern Exposure, reigning Emmy chance with 16 nominations, and it lost all 16 bids. So if these shows knock themselves out, there's still a chance for, I don't really need to stir the pot because, there's so much going on in this category. That we could really still see an upset here where, if This Is Us takes 3, it's in 4 acting categories. I'm not talking nominations. If it takes 3 of those races, it starts to look more and more like a show that could, buck all the trends and still win drama series. I wouldn't predict it, but it could still do it.
Though that can be deceiving sometimes, because the one I always remember is I think it was the Emmys in 2003, where The Sopranos was winning big throughout that evening. It won writing, lead actor, lead actress, supporting actor, and so you think it was going to be a no given that it would finally win drama series. And I'll never forget, William H. Macy actually opened the envelope and he turned it around because I think he was in disbelief that The West Wing had won again.
Well, I'm just saying that if all those other shows knock themselves out in the tech categories, and then you start seeing on the evening, This Is Us start picking up Ron Cephas Jones. Maybe Gerald McCraney's already won. And then it picks up Sterling K. Brown or Milo. It starts to look more and more like it's in a good position, because while you can't win with just the acting branch, just because it's not nominated by the sound mixers, or I can't remember all of those off the top of my head, so don't quote me if it is the sound mixers, doesn't mean there aren't enough sound mixers out there who would vote for it. So I think I still see how The Crown could win. Downton Abbey did win miniseries for its first season, so it is still a possibility, and it's in most of the categories it's supposed to be. If it takes down Feud in some of those tech categories it's up against, it's going to start to look really good itself.
The Crown and The Handmaid's Tale are missing from editing, which has awarded. or 14 of the last 15 winners in this category have had an editing nomination. But the one that didn't was the first season of Mad Men, which I think is kind of similar in that it's not like a genre-heavy show. It is a show about people, in still situations talking to each other. So I think there's some leeway with that, especially with how genre-driven the whole Best Drama Series race has become. I think Westworld is very underrated as a contender. I have it in second, ahead of The Handmaid's Tale, because it did get nominated everywhere. And even though it didn't win, say, the Producers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild, like Stranger Things, it was competing against Game of Thrones at both of those. And I would think that if Game of Thrones is taking votes away from anybody, it would be Westworld. And Game of Thrones is obviously taking a ton of votes.
Yeah, if Westworld just picks up everything where Game of Thrones left off, it absolutely, 8, 9 awards in starts.
And I do have Westworld in my third slot, so it would not.
I do too.
It probably would surprise me in the moment, but looking at all the factors in the big picture, it's definitely feasible.
I mean, Westworld is ranked 5th on Gold Derby's odds, so that's kind of sad, I think. Gold Derby right now, which is maybe a week ago or two by the time this is online, they have
today's newspaper. That way we'll see.
Yes, they have Stranger Things in first place, but more people are actually predicting The Handmaid's Tale to win.
Yeah, I think this is just one of those times where, all of those things that usually you need or that are usually really good factors as far as pointing to be a contender for drama series or the winner. We might see one of them missing from the winner this year.
Also,
and the thing that just keeps me coming back to Handmaid's Tale is I don't think anybody really expected it to have the performance that it has, and it's the buzz around that show really just has continued. I keep seeing article after article where it's like, The Handmaid's Tale is the best series. There was a recent thing in Rolling Stone. It's already listed as one of the great series of all time. And that was something that I just saw. I think it was Rolling Stone. Don't quote me on that. But, the fact that it's so overperformed, particularly in the acting, I don't know how many of us thought Samira Wiley and Ann Dowd would both get in. And the fact that it got multiple nominations for writing and directing.
Do you think that Stranger Things is kind of hurt because they couldn't get Winona Ryder in? I mean, that I just can't get past that.
Normally, I would say yes, because that's something that you would be looking for. But when you look at how big they performed overall, and they were still able to get Millie Bobby Brown, who is 11? We went through this 13. The other day. 13. She's a 13-year-old kid in there. I think, and that is a very tough category.
But she is an A-list, Oscar-nominated movie star.
Yeah,
but I mean, Oscar nominees miss out all the time,
I know. It worries me
and
that
her profile was much higher, 25 years ago, and this has been kind of a comeback role. So, it's not like.
You think if they put her in lead, she would have gotten in? I think she would have.
I think she might have stood a better chance of getting in if she was in lead.
I thought she was locked for supporting, so I don't know.
I thought she was going to win.
But I feel like with all of them but Stranger Things, and we've never seen Game of Thrones have trouble with it. I could just see how Best Actor or Best Actress go Best Drama Series. You pick up the one and then you win Best Drama Series.
But also I would say, I do think the Winona Ryder thing is a very good point, but I also think that to counter that, I think the best counter to that is looking at guest actress in a drama and how what's her name, Shannon
Purser.
Shannon Purser, yeah, how she got in. To me, that's a real signal. I equate that to me that that cancels out any feelings I might have, any trepidations I might have had about Winona Ryder not getting in.
I know. I'm just so in this category. This makes me.
It's fun. It's what we want. You know, we don't want it. We don't want, the same thing all the time.
I know, but we all missed Best Picture at the Oscars this year. I can't miss Best Drama Series.
I've gotten Best Picture the last 3 years wrong. Okay, so
3. How did you miss? Oh, I'm trying to think. What did that mean?
Birdman. I missed Birdman. I thought Boyhood was going to win.
Oh my gosh!
And then I thought The Revenant was going to win. And this year I had La La Land.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah, 3 years strong.
Yeah, I don't know. I do worry about what you mentioned, Charlie, about, as far as like, I love The Handmaid's Tale. I read the book, but it is a tough show to get through. I mean, some of that is rough. And
just to build on what Andy said, the reason it's rough is because it's so timely. Game of Thrones was one thing where you had a lot of uncomfortable scenes in there, that of some of the same subject matter of rape and all that and all that. But but because it was in this different context, it didn't feel as timely. Whereas Handmaid's Tale definitely it has a very uncomfortable ring of the moment to it.
do you think The Crown could just kind of King's Speech their way into this? I mean, remember when that won Best Picture a couple years ago, and we had a lot of innovative and exciting films or films that we were more passionate about, but they just kind of went the tried and true Best Picture way. I'm worried that The Crown still seems very prestigious. I know it didn't perform as well as we had thought, but it performed. It got everything it was, for the most part, supposed to get. And we've seen, we've got some genre shows in there. It is, kind of the elite of them all.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that that hurts something, say, like that Stranger Things or Westworld, because other than Game of Thrones, which is certainly more of a fantasy genre, this is a category that tends to go with the more human elements. I mean, maybe Westworld is too genre to win drama series. Maybe Stranger Things is too horror for drama series.
I actually have another question about Stranger Things now.
Whereas The Crown, I don't think The Crown necessarily has the passion and the relevance now that The Handmaid's Tale does. But we have to look at traditionally in this category, not that tradition really matters with new voting and stuff like that, but traditionally, if you look at the types of winners that come up, Game of Thrones really has been a recent addition to this type of genre winning. I mean, before Game of Thrones, the last series with any kind of fantasy, what was the last one? Lost?
I wouldn't even count Lost season 1. I mean, that really wasn't as much fantasy as it was like the second and the last couple of seasons. Do you think Stranger Things could possibly be skewed too young? Like, maybe it's just too, I mean, you are following these kids around on bikes trying to solve a mystery of what happened to their friend. It's got a lot of teenagers in it.
It could, but I have a feeling that or maybe it's, but you also, I think the other thing to consider is that this actually might help it, is that, remember, the show takes place in the mid-1980s, and so a lot of people in their 30s will remember being that age in the 1980s, so, that could actually play to its advantage.
It could. I'm just trying to, go through every,
I think the thing about this race is that all these shows did extremely well in the nominations. Like you mentioned Lost, that's a show that started out with 12 nominations, or Homeland, that's another show that won for its first season, it got 9. Whereas all these shows, have more than that. Like The Crown, they only have, 13 nominations, and they didn't get everything that we thought they would. But, did they not get Jared Harrison because, there's lack of support for the show, or did they not get him in just because, he kind of is only in 2 episodes? And maybe there are just more shows that the voters are watching now, and they're, assigning nominations a bit more fairly.
It's possible.
Yeah, I've never really bought into that whole The Crown underperformed thing. If you look at some of the races that it didn't get into, it's not like there's a shocking omission.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, there's not how could that not get in?
Yeah. And it could still pick up actor, it could still pick up actress, it could still pick up like directing or writing. And if it starts chugging along there, it's going to start looking more and more like it's about to win drama series. I mean, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, like it's missing from sound mixing, which usually gets the best drama series winner. But it kind of reminds me at the Oscars where, we have all these categories where they normally just check off the best picture winner. And then these days they're kind of thinking a lot more about like what actually is, good picture editing and good directing versus just checking the same thing off every single time.
And I think from a statistical, sorry.
I'm sorry, just to build on what you were saying, Tony, though, I'm looking at the nominations for The Crown. There are some striking omissions. It's not nominated for costumes.
Yes, it is.
Wait.
The Crown?
I'm looking
I just wrote a piece on it. It's nominated for costumes.
Oh, then I must be looking at an incomplete list then.
Yeah, The Crown is nominated in the same, isn't it this catch-all drama series, period costumes with Feud. We're going to have a battle royale, Oscars versus the coronation and the royal wedding.
Divas versus queens.
Yeah, it's in every category it's supposed to be. And I think from just a statistical point, they say, 14 out of 15. There's always going to be that year where it's like 9 times out of 10 you need this, but here's the 10th year when you don't. We might just be in one of those years where maybe you just don't need one of these nominations.
And with all of the changes into how Emmy voting is working, plus changes to the makeup of the Academy, there are so many variables that I'm not sure we're going to need more data based on this new voting system in order to see if there's a trend. Right now, we're operating off of trends that exist primarily under an old voting system. So
and under the Game of Thrones juggernaut. So we've got, I can't even find a past example with 3 new shows. Like this is hard. This is really, really difficult. But House of Cards has enjoyed its day as being Netflix's premiere show, so they've kind of passed that over.
Is House of Cards season 5 the worst reviewed season ever nominated for best drama series?
Probably. I thought it was going to be out. Honestly, I took it out.
And then it got another nomination too. The whole recession of.
Yeah, then it picked up a nomination.
Yeah.
It's like a virus that's expanding.
It was so dull. I thought it was smart of them to release it in May because, then it would have been after the election. But I don't know if it's just real life made it seem dull or it didn't really seem like House of Cards because Mahershala Ali wasn't in there. We didn't see Raji Kathy. Well, we didn't see a lot of the people who made the show interesting. And then it's like, we're going to steal the election. It's like, oh, well, been there, done that. We've already
Riley, you told us that you have Westworld in second. What do you have in first?
I've got Stranger Things because even though I think that Westworld might have won Producers Guild, Screen Actors Guild if Game of Thrones wasn't there, Stranger Things actually did win them, so I have to go with that by default. I also think it's kind of cooler, more like Game of Thrones in that it got people talking, it gets people excited. Yeah.
And you also have all the hype going on now for season 2, so that can't hurt.
Do you think the fact that Westworld, you can kind of somewhat forget that it's a fantasy show because they're like in this park, they're interacting with these robots. These robots are played by humans, obviously, that maybe that could help it a little bit, that it doesn't seem as genre as like Stranger Things.
But you just said robots.
Well, but they don't. But they look like humans. I mean, they're interacting with these like droid kind. I don't know what you call them, but I'm just saying like Stranger Things. When you see it, screams.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing though. After Game of Thrones winning, the dozens of awards that it has, yeah, for me, just once we get to the creative arts, then I will have total confidence in whatever wins casting because it's casting directors, its directors, and its producers all voting on the same award.
And what if there's a shock and Handmaid's Tale actually loses casting but wins drama series?
Yeah.
Well, then I was wrong. But
how many years in a row has that been the new statistic when they changed casting, Riley? Just out of curiosity.
Well, casting up until 3 years ago, it was only voted on by casting directors, and they were also reviewing like tapes. So they usually just went with a first-year show, whereas lately it's Game of Thrones or Veep wins consecutive awards just because they seem to be.
So for 3 years, they've included they've included directors and producers.
Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't give me enough evidence to 100% go off of it. I mean, I think that if Westworld loses casting but wins 10 Emmys that night, or wins 10 Emmys, it's not going to look like it's going to win drama series at that point.
Well, let's remember, how many years did Game of Thrones dominate creative arts and not?
They didn't really dominate until Boardwalk Empire went off. I mean, there were some years Boardwalk Empire had more nominations than it. It won more Emmys.
Yeah, there were years
still never won drama series.
It would win like 8 or 7 Emmys at not just its first year. Wasn't there like one year where it won like 6 at the Creative Arts, and it was ridiculous because no one saw it coming. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For some reason, like they really, really love Boardwalk Empire. It probably would have won its first year under the tape system, under this plurality vote. But it's one of those things where I just want to see how everything plays out as a whole. I don't think you can just boil this down to one category, because how do they perform overall against each other?
But yeah, like going off of that though, like Westworld is the biggest budget of these nominees, and I do think it'll pick up like editing just because of the vote splitting. So like I would expect Westworld to do very well like across the board, but it's more in these kind of broad-based categories where they're not voting on something specific like costumes, where I'm looking toward.
And I think Westworld actually has a much better shot at winning directing than many people think. I mean, that's a category where they, at least recently, they tend to go with the biggest directed episode.
But they usually, for first-year shows, only award their pilots. That's the one hang-up I have with that, which would favor probably Stranger Things, only because I think Handmaid's Tale is going to vote split their way out of it. Because personally, I would pick The Bridge.
Well, they usually submit the pilot, though. Like Jonathan Nolan went with the finale.
Yeah, Jonathan Nolan didn't submit the pilot, so.
I know, but I'm just saying, historically, typically when you look at the winners from first-year shows, their pilots, but I would look out for the Oscar nominee. They do love them, and winners. So it's tough.